how much does stability really matter? The Astros are playing in their 7th straight ALCS. They haven't had a ton of stability. The Red Sox, not a ton of stability. They're not in the playoffs this year, and they're having some issues. And one ex-Guardians pitcher is going to be looking for a new place to call home to have a little bit of stability.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Today's show is brought to you by coughing. I'm kidding. We're going to try to keep this under control, but there's a bit of an issue for both Justin and myself. It's a shame it's not a Jase Medical Day with all of that going on. We do want to take a second and tell you to download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This is the time where I wish we could play music. People have asked about, like, where's our little 8-bit sound? I emailed about playing music, never heard back. We are just right now told not to play music. If I could, copyright stuff. So if I could play anything right now, I would just hold up a picture of like Zach, please. Well, not hold it because I don't own any, but have one appear on the screen and play the sad puppy song. Goodbye, sweet prince. We hardly knew you. Listen, I've had a long-standing theory that 2020 season that Plesac and Bieber looked really, really good because the Centrals were terrible. Now, there's going to be someone out there like, hey, 3 American League Centrals and 3 National League Central teams made the postseason. And this is true. And amongst those 6 teams, they won 2 games and all lost in the first round. The bigger point is those divisions are so bad that since you only face the Central, they just beat up on the really bad teams. Milwaukee made it. The last 2 teams in the NL Central were NL Central, in the NL playoffs were from the Central. And it was just 2020 was a weird year.
It was 60 games.
And listen, those teams were not good. And yeah, Zach Plesac in his debut year was actually pretty solid. I have no fault there. But there is just that one difference where every other year he's had a walk rate that's between 2 to 3. That year it was 1. Every other year his strikeout rate, it's been like 6, maybe approaching 7. It was 9.3 that year. And yes, he did play with the cheating king and good old TB before then, who we know was modifying baseball, so he might have learned some of that. But this team, and it looked like Clevenger was a modifier as well, and who knows about Bieber potentially. That's been one of those things. People have made that accusation. But maybe it was modifying baseballs, but it didn't help him in 2021 when you could still modify before the rules changed. I think it was just facing terrible teams. 8 starts against terrible teams. I mean, if I went and looked at the 8 teams he played, he might have just played entirely trash until the postseason. Because he got the postseason. No, did he get the postseason? Wasn't he the postseason starter in game 2? Wasn't it not Carrasco? It was Plesac for game 2 after Bieber in game 1. And Bieber.
No, it was Carrasco. It was Carrasco.
Was it? I could not remember. But yeah, and then Bieber got lit up after his great year. So I think that I've had people argue with me about this, that all of baseball is pretty good. It's not. There's a lot of bad teams. When you face the worst of the worst, you look better. And if you didn't know it was Plesac and you put all those years in a row, you'd be like, outlier. I don't know. He might find a home next year. I thought it was interesting for all the teams that need pitching. We spent the whole year talking about how teams need pitching. Nobody wanted to try him for, roughly $2 million when he got waived. Like that would have been about the cost of freight. Just hey, maybe we can fix him. Maybe there's something. No one thought there was anything to try. He's probably going to have to take a minor league invite somewhere.
Yeah, I don't foresee him getting a major league deal anywhere. I mean, and the pitching market this offseason might be kind of rough, like we've talked about. Although there are, it's I don't say it's top heavy, but there are good options. But it's kind of like there are good options, and then there are 50 feet of crap, and then there's pitchers like Zach Plesac. Yeah, there's like he came over 2019. I didn't have him ranked very high on my prospect list.
I did. In full transparency, I was the high man on him because I saw him in college. I'm like, oh, this kid's athletic. He's a 2-way guy. He showed some good stuff. He just couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, I didn't see him a lot in the minors, to tell you the truth. Like, he obviously was coming off Tommy John when he got to Cleveland. because he had Tommy John his last year of college. That's when Cleveland grabbed him out of Ball
He
State.
I think he was like he was a two-way guy,
But
outfielder, and
he didn't miss a lot of bats in the minors, like, and he was also older. Like, I know he was at high A at age, what was that, 2018? He was 23 years old at high A, and he missed some bats there, and it was a lot of control over command type stuff, and that was how he was getting by. And I know he came up, and everyone's like, "Oh, this kid came out of nowhere." Nobody, placed it. People didn't have him ranked, and because I think at the time I was still running IBI, and like I was like, "Yeah, maybe I missed something here." Like, there's, he doesn't throw that hard, but there's a good slider and control, and he lost more fastball velocity, and the slider became hittable, and nobody respected his fastball, so they didn't have to really account for either of those pitches, and they got destroyed. And yeah, I don't know. He tinkered with so many things too. Like, he tinkered with deliveries and his grip, and maybe it was over tinkering, but you had to do something to change because he was just getting, every pitch was getting destroyed. And you're right, 2020 is a giant outlier. Like, his ERA that year was 2.28, and his expected ERA was 3.40. His best ERA before that was 3.81. That was his rookie season. But his expected ERA that year was 5.48. And his best expected ERA of his career, besides the 2020 year, was 4.51. So that tells me at best, Zach Plesac is a replacement level starter. He's probably a guy you maybe call up for a doubleheader start if you don't have anybody else, or as a sixth starter in a pinch for a guy who might be missing a start or two, or if you're really beat up. I mean, shoot, Cleveland was more interested in pitching Noah Syndergaard than let's try Zach Plesac again, because they could have. I know maybe trading Rosario to the Dodgers and getting Syndergaard back was maybe about balancing salaries for both teams a little bit.
100%.
But the fact that they were able to willing to roll with Syndergaard for a month instead of saying, well, maybe we can see if, we still have club control over Zach Plesac. He's still way cheaper. Maybe we can find something again. No, they never went back to that well. For all their problems this year, I mean, Touki Toussaint was up back after him, and they did bullpen games, and then they grabbed those guys off waivers. It's like, yeah, you're right. 2020 was such an outlier with him. I'd be very curious to see what happens to him. I know he's put in a lot of time doing whatever, working on stuff. I don't think anybody doubts like that he's not trying. It's not like he's going out there and just hoping for the best. Like, I think everybody can see that he's put the work in. It's just, it is what it is. And I think he got always by on a lot of control.
Yeah, he was a fringe guy. And the problem with that is if anything backs up even slightly, or if you lose any confidence in it, or your control doesn't stay and the command doesn't stay at that high level, stuff happens. And we saw, he would have good stretches. He'd have bad stretches. This is the right call. Like, you're not going to let him hit. Listen, he wasn't going to be arbitration eligible because he was in the minors anyways. Him opting out is for the best. I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, Josh Tomlin had a better career than him. Like, Josh Tomlin.
100%. But Tomlin had better control and command. Like, he didn't have Tomlin's level of control and command.
Right. And Tomlin was really never a prospect. I remember seeing Tomlin a lot at Lake County, and I
had him on the outside almost entirely because I remember this because he made the top 20 prospect list back in the day at Baseball America for the AA level. And anyone who made that list back when I was not like, okay, so my prospect list back in the day when Tomlin was in AA Akron was based off of like, hey, he's listed in some place. So my prospect lists were heavy on influence.
Right.
I do remember he made it because he at least made that top 20 list, and he was rated as best control at the level. So anyone who also rated best any tool, that was part of what I was doing, which just made me, I was a compiler, not a evaluator.
Yeah. When Tomlin was a prospect, I will say I was still pretty young, and he went like 10-3 at Lake County. I thought, well, that's a great record. He must be able to win games. I didn't really have a whole lot on him other than that when I wasn't like I was ranking prospects, but really back then I think he was with Lake County in like 03 or 04. So I was still in high school at that point, and I didn't know a whole lot. I don't know a whole lot more now, but I definitely didn't know. I knew a lot less then, and I went off some of that. But yeah, if you look at the two of them, Josh Tomlin had a better career. if Plesac had Tomlin's level of control and command and maybe just pitchability, I don't know. Maybe he would still be around. I think that just tells you the kind of pitcher Plesac is. Like because Tomlin never had great stuff. Like he had a good curveball. He threw every pitch you could think of besides a knuckleball. Like he threw cutters, he threw four seams, he threw sinkers, he threw change-ups. Like he threw everything. It was getting by with a lot of unpredictability and control and a couple of decent pitches. Plesac, two pitches. It was the slider and the fastball, and didn't have, like you said, didn't have Tomlin's command or control, and just didn't have that really at least one standout pitch. The slider was good, and I thought maybe they could put him in the bullpen. Maybe he can be a slider monster in the bullpen, and maybe he gets the velocity up. But that never happened either, and he clearly wants to stay a starter. And yeah, I don't foresee him getting anything more than a minor league deal this offseason.
Agreed. Like, and why would anyone do that? Like, everyone could have had him for $2 million. No one wanted to even try. He's just gonna be. He's trying to get a camp invite to a team.
Watch him resurface with like the White Sox. I mean, there might be a team out there that thinks they can fix him.
I bet he gets back to the big leagues. I would bet on that and not against it. I will bet on some more fun conversations as we continue on in the show, though.
I agree. That's one thing we agree on. And the one thing I think we can agree on, too, is you should be downloading the Gametime app if you are trying to get tickets to any event. I got to tell you, next month, I got to let Jeff know this. I haven't let him know yet. I've got a lot of events coming up in November. I bought tickets to events long ago that I had forgotten about, that now it's time to go to these events. And if you're a person who wants to get tickets so late to events before they happen, whether they're comedy shows, sporting events, concerts, if you wait until the last minute, don't worry about it, because you can browse the Gametime app and get last minute tickets with flash deals, and you'll be guaranteed to get the best price. Because if you find the ticket in the same section or row for less, the Gametime guarantee is going to make sure you get 110% of the difference from Gametime. You can even see seating charts where your seats are. If you are into that kind of thing, I like to know where I sit before I buy a ticket. And when you use our code LOCKEDONMLB on the Gametime app, you're going to get $20 off that first purchase. So create that account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. ALCS finally got underway on Sunday, and NLCS to follow. Listen to those games on your Sirius XM app. Be curious to see what the conversation will be on Sirius baseball radio on channels there when the Guardians finally find their manager. We know now that per Paul Hoynes.com that the Guardians are going to, or they already have interviewed Chris Valaika, and apparently not only did Mike Sarbaugh not interview for the job, he declined an interview. So
that's two people. And I think
internally, by the way.
Yeah. And that's 3 internals with 2 internal declines. I think that is a sure sign they just don't think, like, why spend the time? Like, I'm not going to get this.
They're not going to get it.
Yeah. And, I think there's a degree of that. Could be a degree of someone like Sandy, who seems like he's just content in his role and doesn't really want the added pressure. But I think they know. I also
think that those guys maybe just don't. Yeah, you're right. They don't. They're at a stage of their career where they don't want to do that.
So, I mean, the thing with both those guys is their jobs could change, their roles. If you get a new manager, there's no guarantee that they're just going to accept, the way things are set up. If you're coming in here, you're going to want to have the power to do things your own way. And I think right now, if you're looking at the way things are set up, those guys could be in for a role change, which is why I think you'd want to interview. But I also think that it just leads to what I've been kind of. Yeah, and it leads to what I've been pushing from the start, which is I think this team is all about external options. I think they can even see that. That's part of the reason I think some of these guys just aren't pushing for the interview. It's like they know there isn't a chance.
Yeah, probably that. Like you said, I think they're just comfortable with their career at this point. And to reiterate, I think I talked about this with Zach last week, and if you hadn't had a chance to go back and listen to last week's interviews with Zach, a lot of good insight on not only the years with Tito here, but the manager search going on right now. Chris Antonetti said Sandy Alomar will be back. He will continue to have a role with this club. He didn't box himself in and say he's going to be the first base coach, or he's going to be this coach, or he's going to have this role. Like, he just said he'll have a role. That is going to be up to the manager. I think that's just saying that should the new manager come in and say, I want this guy in this role, and Sandy doesn't want to do it, the organization will shift Sandy to a different role. So the organization's already saying they're going to guarantee Sandy in a role in some effect. They did not go out of their way to say that for anybody else, but it is interesting. They're also interviewing Chris Valaika, and so I would say, like, we've seen a lot of candidates that have don't have a large resume or maybe a little more unknown.
Craig Albernaz. I'm sorry.
He's definitely unknown to some people. They know Valaika. Like, we thought that maybe some of those other interviews could have been for, maybe they'll be part of the staff, like John McDonald, not necessarily the manager role. Valaika, they already know he's on the staff. They went out of their way to finally move on from Ty Van Berkeley and bring in Valaika. And I'll be curious to see. I know there's going to be a faction of people who are like, why are they interviewing Valaika? The offense was terrible. And this just goes back to, okay, is it Valaika? Is it the players? Because these are the same players in 2022 that they made the playoffs with, and everyone was like, oh, maybe the dink and dunk offense works. Maybe the switch to contact, they're zigging and everyone's zagging. And then we found out that a lack of power doesn't guarantee you a whole lot of consistency offensively. It requires a lot of things to go right. And is that Valaika's fault? Like, how many times we had the conversation that, can you expect the chef to make a meal you're looking for if you don't let him pick the ingredients? Like, you got to have good hitters to work with. It's the same with Van Berkeley too. Truthfully, everyone wanted to run him out of town, but you gave him Bradley Zimmer and Oscar Mercado and Bobby Bradley, and you didn't give Van Berkeley a lot to work with. He was the hitting coach in 2016, right? Van Berkeley, when they had Napoli and Santana and Kipnis and Lindor and Jose, and Chisenhall was good in his role, and Roberto Perez had 20. I know that might have been the baseball a little bit, but like. And this all is to say, too, that coaches and managers get way too much credit when things go well, and they also get way too much blame when things go bad. So that's why I said when we did our show about offseason priorities that, whoever they hire is important, no doubt, but it can't be the reason it's not my number one priority for them is because you can't give them the same ingredients and expect new results. Like, you could do some things to change it up and make a different flavor out of it. But at the end of the day, the players got to perform. And if you don't have the right players, it's not going to work.
I will say the Chris Valaika's midseason interview, again, just left a horrible taste in my mouth as that interview with Zach. It's like, that felt like someone being reactive. Yeah. It's like, it felt reactive and like condescending and someone who was just not there, ready for the job. And it's a situation. Yeah. You have, the ingredients aren't great, but you took this job knowing what the ingredients are, knowing what the approach is, and you should have some. Listen, I don't like the way they set this team up. I've been very honest about that. Am I a baseball mind? No. Am I connected to the front office? Only by the barest of threads. But when I play anything, I sit there and put way too many hours into OOTP. I play at the hardest difficulty. Not that matters, but the one thing I feel like having put probably thousands of hours into OOTP, sadly, is this contact only approach. You need additional tools. You need some balance. You need walks and hitting, or you need power. And this approach has too much variance and too much luck built into it. Hence why we talk about BAPIP so much on the show. And he bought into this approach. He knew the players he was going to have. He needed to have a mindset as the hitting coach of how he was going to handle the variance and luck. And instead, this team just regressed. So, I mean, I agree with you to a degree. Like, yeah, coaches get way too much credit for player performance, but I also think he looked like a guy without a plan and a way to adapt. All we heard was like, Josh Bell is hard to coach, and Josh Bell goes to Miami, and they figured it out. Like, why was that?
Did they though? Because I think we all saw that was coming. Like,
no, I know, but he listened more there than he did here. Like.
I don't know if we know that for sure. I think Josh Bell was hitting the ball hard. And
why did Richie Palacios go to the Cardinal? I mean, I know this is what you hate. They go to a new team and perform, but it is weird how many guys here don't seem to get the correct coaching, or they somehow do exceed when they leave. Like, that is something at some point we have to like, hey, Owen Miller came back to earth. So, and Richie Palacios is a small sample, and Josh Bell is Josh Bell. So yeah, this is what he does. He has a good half and a bad half. We just happen to get the bad half. But I when it's like I said, again, this whole team across the board, when everyone has a down year, that reflects back to me.
Agreed. I don't know if that's all Chris Valaika's fault. But I mean, yeah, as a coach, you do take a certain amount of responsibility for that. And you're right. He did accept the job knowing the players that were here. And, I'm sure in the interview they were honest and said, this is the approach. This is he knows the players he's going to work with. And this is what we do. I got two more things on Valaika I want to talk about. And we wanted to get to Boston's hilarious GM search here before we get out of here on this episode. So stick with us. A lot more to talk about today.
October baseball is back, and anyone can make a postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Excuse me, when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to create your new account. Right now, what we're seeing in today's game, Jordan Montgomery is certainly a name to know when it comes to FanDuel, and a name to pay attention to. What a day for him. Leodis Tavares, also someone we'll probably talk about at some point this offseason, maybe even with Locked On Braves host Bryce, but you want to head to FanDuel with some of that information, and you can get on the action on the first pitch into the final out, bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you want to wait the whole game to get a W, predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockdown right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel.com, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And stay locked on to the Sirius XM app for all of your postseason action. Listen to ALCS and NLCS action there. Okay, so the Valaika thing, one thing. I think part of the approach is this, and I think Cleveland has admitted this. These contact guys, right? Like you get these guys who make contact, and their argument is, well, it's easier to teach a guy to hit for power than it is to teach a guy to hit. Like this was kind of the thing with Will Benson. They took the Will Benson type of player and, hey, he's got a lot of power. Can we teach him to put the bat on the ball more? And, to Will Benson's credit and maybe some of Cleveland's too, because, before he got traded, we saw the strikeout rate come down. We saw some things get better. I don't know if that was more of a contact thing, much as it was an approach thing. That's not the point I'm trying to make here is I think they felt like, and we've seen evidence of this, the weighted bat training and things like that. This is all around baseball, not just Cleveland, is that you can take a guy who doesn't hit for a lot of power, but he makes a lot of contact, and hopefully he can add some power. This is not dissimilar to Jose Ramirez, right? Jose Ramirez made a ton of contact, 2016, not a power hitter, but he learned to hit the ball to the pull side and get it in the air. And that's something a lot of teams are also looking at too. And Juan Brito looks like that to that effect too. Not every guy is going to be Jose Ramirez. That's the thing you have to worry about too. But they felt like they could take some of these guys like Quan and Will Brennan and Tyler Freeman and say, okay, they put the bat on the ball. Can we teach them to hit for more power and get to 20 home runs? Can we just get them to 20? And I think it's hard to get a guy who maybe has 40 power where it's a 10 to 12 home run type of bat and get him into the 20s. I think that's hard. That's maybe the approach they were going with, thinking that would work out. And if that's what you're banking on doing, then yeah, your hitting coach, not just your hitting coach, it's going to be the entire organization. They have Alex Eckelman, who is like their director of hitting. It's everybody from him to guys like Chris Valaika that have influence in how this works. So that approach is risky, but if it doesn't work out, then the experiment fails. Is it the coaching? It might be, because you can't blame the players if your coaching can't help them do it. If that was your philosophy all along, the players that might be who they be. That might be who they are as players. The other thing is, let's say, does Valaika have any sort of input over the kind of players he wants, the hitters he wants? You might have been given one thing, right? But would he be given influence over acquiring certain kind of players or a certain type of hitter? You know what I mean? Like maybe that's part of the interview you're asking him in the interview is, okay, we gave you this type to work with, and this is what we have in the system, but what do you feel is important to have in a player or a hitter? And I'm not, because you're not just interviewing Chris Valaika for his job, right? He's already interviewed for the hitting coach job. So you're not interviewing him just to keep his job. If you are, I don't think he's taking it. I don't think he's interested because, why would he interview for the job he's already had here? So I'm not saying he's a serious candidate. Maybe he is. I'm just saying, I don't think it's a case of interviewing to keep his own job. But how much influence does he gain over the type of hitter? Because we see what he worked with and didn't work, or is hard to work with. But what influence does he have over the type of player he'd like to work with if he's elevated? I mean,
yeah, but I mean, again, this is the way this team's built. Like, he knew what there was when he's coming in. It's not like they've outside of Bell.
He had no influence over that at the time.
I know, but he came in knowing what it was. He knew the bad he was getting. He knew the team that he was coming to, and he needed to have approaches or knowledge or the ability to work with that. I mean, outside of Zunino and Bell, nothing has changed, and those guys didn't stick around. So it's great. It seems like they're going to give every internal candidate an opportunity, but I know we were pressed for time, so we should flip around and talk about how Boston is chaos and no one wants to go there.
Yeah. The story, I think it was from Boston. Was it Massachusetts Live? I forget the story. I think it's Christopher Smith, who's a good writer for the Red Sox or covers the Red Sox. So they've been having a hard time getting candidates out there in Boston for the GM job because the issue is they've had a lot of turnover in that organization recently, and the GM coming in will not get to pick his own head or his own manager because they're sticking with Alex Cora, and the farm system is kind of rough. Like, they have good position player prospects. Are they going to spend money? Because this is a team that also forced their GM to trade Mookie Betts, and that GM is now gone because the trade didn't work out, but everybody knew he was forced into it. Like, what are you going to do? But it's just an interesting conversation Chris Antone's not going anywhere. Mike Chernoff hasn't even been rumored to go there because it doesn't matter, because I don't think they're going to have Mike Chernoff would only leave for a president of baseball operations job, I would think. And I don't know if that's available in Boston, but just interesting that, the Red Sox, who even in their years where they're cutting payroll, obviously they have a payroll that dwarfs what Cleveland spends. And they've been denied by GMs or candidates to not interview there. And it just makes you wonder, like, how much of a price does stability give you? Like, obviously Cleveland has the payroll issue, but they never have issues getting people hired away from them, or I don't think there's any lack of interest in the managerial job here. They have certainly no issues getting any quality candidates into their front office. Like, people want to interview to work here too. Just interesting. What is the ultimate price for stability? To give up stability. What's your comfort level with? There's not a lot of stability here, but I can work with a lot of money. I might get paid well. Like, didn't we have this conversation a few weeks ago? Like, how hard it is to find a good boss to work for? Didn't we have that conversation?
Yep.
Boston seems to be teetering on that edge of maybe it's not a great environment to work in, despite how much money they can give you. Like, there's only so much crap you can put up with. I mean, they'll find somebody, obviously, and they're still going to spend a ton of money, and they'll end up being decent. But, like, it's just an interesting juxtaposition. The Astros have had a lot of turnover too, right? And they're in their 7th straight ALCS.
Yeah, they have had massive turnover, and they're still getting it done. But it helps when you cheat. So,
and the culture's bad there.
So, but very quickly, we've got a few minutes. Should we talk about how hilarious it was that the situation came out where the Sean Murphy trade was reported, what the Giants end of it was going to be, what they asked the Giants for? Again, with the reminder that the Oakland Athletics took Esteury Ruiz, who was apparently their target because he's got great speed, and then still don't have a center fielder after Christian Pache, who is a pretty useful player for the Phillies right now, who Oakland couldn't figure out. David, is his name David Frost? Wasn't that the poet? Forrest, not
yes.
Frost. Frost is a
Robert Frost. Is
Robert
poet, right?
Frost, yeah. And David Frost the like Frost versus Nixon guy? Isn't there a David Frost? But
probably somewhere, yeah.
Yes,
Robert
so that
Frost.
is the Frost versus Nixon guy. I just double checked that. But he's just done an awful job. And these two trades are just front and center with it. So if you missed it, they were talking about Mario Luciano, who arguably was the Twins' number 2 prospect, I think, a year ago. I think most people, Giants. Man, I'm having a hard time. Giants. And because I think everyone had Harrison 1. And then they either wanted Harrison or they wanted both. Either of those guys are light years ahead of Ruiz. And then the back end arms they got. that they settled for in Oakland. And the fact that they had made some, talk about Luciano in pieces to then backtrack and be like, Ruiz. It's like, Mike, listen, I talked about it all the time on the show. A year ago, I was like, listen, I wasn't going to trade the big three. A lot of people love George Valera. I'm like, give him Valera, give him Allen, give him another piece. Would I miss Allen now? 100%. 100%.
Especially after the Espino injury.
Yes, but I would still do that deal because Naylor you could very easily, people may not like this, but if you had Murphy and you locked him up like they did, Naylor could be that outfielder you need. Like, he is so super athletic. He could have moved off catcher and then been that bat we're talking about. Like, this team just needs bats. Logan Allen is better than anything by a mile right now that Oakland got. Maybe in either of their trades. Like, I might rather have Logan Allen than Shea Langeliers.
100%.
Like, what a butcher job by those in charge there.
Yeah, you have to take these things with a grain of salt too, because it's always, well, this is what they asked for. And we've heard this going back years with like the Reds and Todd Frazier and how the Reds wanted like Cody Allen and Bradley Zimmer or Danny Salazar. And it's like, they could say that all they want, and that trade was never going to happen. And the Giants, I don't blame them for not trading any of those guys that were reported, but it's just hilarious how, they target every farm system is different in what you want from them. But to shoot high like that and then end up where you did is just hilarious, because Cleveland, I'm sure, could have found a deal that would have been better. But that just tells you why the A's are where they are. I have a lot more to say about the Sean Murphy thing that we didn't get to today. And we also want to talk about the Brewers have a pitching injury situation, and could the Guardians match up with them? So stay tuned for that on tomorrow's show.
Yep, more Murphy, more Brewers, more fun. Thank you for tuning in today. We appreciate all of you everydayers. Remember to do your part, tune in, rate and review, all that fun jive, and go Guardians go.